Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill. Nancy, what is the GOP's game plan for dismantling Obamacare once the president-elect takes office?
Well, they're still trying to figure that out, Anne Marie, because 72 hours ago, they never thought that they would have this opportunity. Most folks up here assumed that Hillary Clinton would win the presidential election. But if passed as prologue, they will most likely work to repeal the law first and then figure out how they want to replace it, imposing some kind of grace period, transition period for people who have gotten insurance via the Affordable Care Act, who are getting subsidies, tax credits in order to afford that insurance, until they can figure out how they're going to provide at least some of those people with insurance instead.
Nancy, are there any steps that Democrats can take to try and save President Obama's signature legislation? And is it correct to say that if they want to replace it, they're going to need more votes than they currently have, Republicans in the House, in the Senate?
You know, as of right now, it doesn't look like there is anything that Democrats can do to save it. They gained a couple of seats in the House and the Senate, but not enough to block legislation, depending on the path that Republicans take to try to pass it. What's really interesting is that beyond having the votes to replace Obamacare with something else, Vlad, Republicans have never been able to articulate what it is that they would replace Obamacare with. 6 years ago, when the law first passed, they said that they were going to very quickly come out with their alternative to Obamacare, which they said would be so much better than what Democrats had come up with. They have never been able to do that. There have been a number of times where they said that their replacement bill was coming out just around the corner. It's never happened. And the reason for that is pretty simple. It is very, very difficult to find ways to both increase coverage to deal with the 30 million or so Americans in this country who don't have health insurance, and also at the same time to figure out a way to bring down health insurance costs, or at the very least to provide some sort of subsidy to lower income Americans so that they can afford the high cost of health insurance. Republicans haven't been able to agree among themselves how they would do that without coming up with a system that looks a lot like the Affordable Care Act, something that they have outright opposed for many years.
So Donald Trump and Speaker Ryan have certainly been at odds over the years over some key issues: how much to cut taxes, immigration policy, whether or not to build that wall. I'm wondering if in their meeting, were they able to find at least some common ground to start a conversation where they could start to work together?
Well, sure. You know, there are things like cutting taxes that are a long-held orthodoxy for the Republican Party, and they will find common cause on that with Donald Trump and with his major advisors. So they didn't get into the nitty-gritty in this conversation, but, you know, there's a lot for them to work on together. And so while many Republicans up here, particularly in the Senate, were openly nervous about the prospect of a Donald Trump presidency and were unwilling to go on the record supporting him, they do know that there are some things that they have wanted to do for a long time that they would never have been able to do with a Democratic president. Beefing up border security, for example, without also figuring out what to do about the millions of people who are in this country illegally. That's something that Democrats would have balked at, not necessarily something that Donald Trump will balk at.
All right, Nancy Cordes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.